There you
We're live.
go. All right. Today we're talking about IIS on Windows. So if you don't know what it is called the Internet Information Services. It's basically Microsoft's web server. It's kind of it's a bit up there in age, I guess. It's similar to like an Apache or an Nginx, but it's not as cool because it's on Windows instead of Linux. It's closed source as compared to the other two most popular as well, but it is free, which is nice. Slide. So what does it support? It supports dynamic content like PHP, but Microsoft suggests their proprietary ASP.NET. I mean, as you see down there, though, PHP is significantly more common. So if you're going to go to a work environment, let's say, it's much more likely that you'll be running into PHP that they're running as opposed to ASP.NET. But I mean, it is still a good skill to have because you see it's running in 20% of servers. So it's still something you should know. IIS also supports virtual hosts for FTP and like web servers. If you don't know, virtual hosts are a way to have more than one website on a single IP. So the way that it works is when you make a request to a server, it has the website that you want and the IP, and then the server will be like, all right, what website do you want? And it'll return that set of like that page to you based on what website you're going to. There's a simple SSL configuration. I find it probably one of the, I mean, it's hard to beat how easy Apache is with like certbot and then copying and pasting it, but it is still pretty easy to set up your own certs on IIS. So I'll be going up how to set it up. So in IA Lab, there is, I believe Shane said he uploaded a copy of my VApp. So if you guys want to pull it down from the catalog, you'll be able to set it up if you wanted to have your own server that's already set up. So just go to here. This connects, right? Cool.
I was just about to do it before he closed it.
Oh, it was?
Yeah,
What? No, it wasn't.
it was.
I'm not. That's propaganda. All right. Just let it auto scale. So to manage it, you'll pull up the server manager, which if it doesn't automatically open, it'll be right here. So to open your IIS manager, it'll be under tools and IIS manager right there, or like the six from the top. Click it. Wait for it to open slowly. All right. So you can see. I don't know. Can you guys read this very well?
No,
No, not at all.
read a
What?
little bit.
Well, if you get closer to your monitor, Shane has 10 monitors, so it's like hard for him to see anything. But you can actually control more than one web server from like this one console if you just add them. But you see, this is like the host name of this current PC or this current server. So we can expand it. And right now, I have 3 sites set up. So you see, I have our my default website, which click the sites folder. You can see that it's running on port 80 and port 443. So this is just the default. So anything that doesn't have an explicit site that isn't recognized that is set in the in the request, it'll just forward it to this one. This one's running on, as you see, FTP, and this one is running on its own domain. So when it sees secret.local, it's going to forward it to this one on port 80. And this is like the path where you'd find the HTML files. So let's start with the default website. So if I go double click on it, I can go browse 443. Wait for it to load in Internet Explorer, the best. Nice and fast. So it just runs on localhost because I just forwards it to the current IP address. So, since it's self-signed certificate, it's Internet Explorer is going to complain about that, but you can just be like, all right, continue to the site. And then boom, you see the extensive HTML I set up. All right, so I'm going to go through the different settings of what the web server is. So see that there's probably the most important like directory browsing. Handle the mappings is how you're going to set up your ASP.NET and your PHP. So if we go here, you'll be like, you can add your own script map, and you have to download the PHP executable, and you like map it so any PHP extension runs through that executable, so that way it can like basically compile your HTML or PHP and give the output to the client. Another important thing, I mean, once you set it and leave it, is your error pages. So you can set your own custom like 401, 404. So if they like go to a page that doesn't exist, you can have them. You could, if you wanted to, you could set this to redirect to a 302. So you can like every time they go to a bad page, it just redirects you to the main page. Right now, I have it set to go to this 404.jpg. So if you pull it up and go to like doesn't because it doesn't exist, it brings you to this 404 not found, which is just this image I've set here. So you can do this you can even add your own, so that way if it has any of the status codes that are brought up, it can run whatever you want. Let's move on to logging. So you can see here that you set your directory. You wouldn't, if you were doing like consolidated logging, you wouldn't be doing it from this interface that's set up on you do it through the command line, which is significantly easier. There's plenty of tutorials online for that though, luckily. So you can basically how you want to roll over. So this log files get like massive over a point of time. So it's best if you like after like a day, they are moving to a zip file, so that way you don't have to worry about them just like growing ever larger and harder to deal with, which is super nice. And then there's the request filtering. So if you want to block certain file names, like you don't want them trying to run exes on by calling, you don't want them to be like, oh, https://localhost/ like backdoor.exe. Like you're gonna want to block those file extensions, so you could like set it up so that way if they have a request with a .exe in it, it'll just drop the request, so you don't have to worry about it as much. And the last thing I'll be going over through the default one will be SSL settings. So we can do is require SSL, and if it's set to require, then it'll automatically forward port 80 to port 443, which is nice. So client certificates, we could require them, apply. And if everything went smoothly, we can go to like http://localhost. And forbidden, yep, that makes sense because I guess IIS isn't smart enough unless you tell it to redirect. But if we do HTTPS, yep, then it should work just fine. All right, let's move on to the secret site. So the difference between I had this set up as a virtual host. So if we go back here, we can see as a binding, it's called secret.local. So this is like the request that comes from. So if we go back to this Internet Explorer, we can go to secret.local, and boom, it'll bring you to that page. So, however, if you type whatever, if you can't just make it whatever you want normally, I have this set up on the desktop as a host shortcut. So if we open it up, we can see that I added secret.local and then just the local IP address. However, if you actually owned a domain and had it set with your vhost set to that domain and the right IP, then it would work out without having to set this. So if we go to the secret site, I can show you how I set up the virtual hosting. So sites, we could add a new website. Site name, it's just for logging, doesn't actually do anything. So it's like defsec. Physical path is where like it'll just end up, like where your root directory would be. So for most things, it's in C:/inetpub. And the default is www root. So I'll just add defsec. And from here you can see the binding. So this is where you would set your virtual host name. So the IP address, I just go with all unassigned, so that way it listens on like all the interfaces. And then you set your host name, so it'd be like defsec.local. So now it's listening on port 80, no SSL. So you go OK. Oh, I gotta and make the new folder. You have to hit make new folder preferably, and then rename it. Okay, all right, this should work better. Yep. So now we made our own virtual host. However, if we go to this, nothing will happen because it doesn't know the IP address of a dot, like this made up URL I gave it. So it just like sit here loading. So to fix that, I would have to go to my host file and just set one up myself. So you just double click the stroke on the desktop, go here, 127.0.0, then defsec.local. However, we didn't have any HTTP, we don't have any like file set up. So once again, it won't do anything except give us an error because there's no files for us to actually access. So it's a good thing that it gives us forbidden so we know it's working. All right, so back to my slides. That's basically how you go about just the bare minimum of setting up a web server on IIS. It's a good skill to know, especially if you're doing a competition like CCDC and they want you to set up HTTPS on IIS. It'd be super easy. You see that you just click require and you can set up a cert. I can actually show you how to do that. So, as soon as I remember. Oh yeah, so I believe. Really? All right. Well, it's usually super easy. I literally found out the first time I was looking at making it, but when you do SSL settings, you do just declare, like you can just pick a cert. Normally, whenever you, maybe it's under, that's just how you add bindings. If you want to add like a random port, like if you want to like really go port 8080, that's just how you do it here. Or if you want to add a different domain. But I'll have to move on from the how to add a cert. I'm telling you, it's super easy. You just gotta do a quick tutorial. So if you run into a thing where you have to add HTTPS to a site, it's not that bad at all. You just need to add a cert, tell the site to use that certificate, that cert, and then add a listener so that way it actually can connect to it on port 443. Now I can go back to my slides. So why IIS is nice, or why IIS, why it's nice is as a GUI for setting it up. Basically, all your options that you have available to you are right there in the GUI. As compared to like Apache and Nginx, you don't know what options there are available to you without digging a whole bunch and like looking through the man pages, and it's like a whole mess to like realize what is at your fingertips. Whereas in IIS, it's just secure by default. There's not a whole lot of like security options because it doesn't need them. I'll go over how to secure IIS in a couple slides here, but it's an easy. Another thing is it's easy for you to see the sites. So if we go back here, you saw how all your sites are just right there. There's no like hidden files that you have to go through your 1,000 folders, as in like Linux, or it's like a pain in the butt to find out what servers are running what, and just trying to figure out why it's not working. You can just see, oh look, started and where it's listening. Way simpler in my opinion. Downsides is it can only be managed with a GUI. It can be managed with a command line very poorly. I definitely wouldn't recommend it. Because so when you come to like SSH, you could do that with the command line, but once again, those commands are very long and painful. And if you want to manage it with the GUI, you're going to need another Windows server or Windows remote management set up on a client or Windows client box. So you won't be able to manage this from like a different Linux box. You want to keep those dirty Linux people away from your systems. That's like lots more overhead to deal with. That's another downside of IIS. The response time is about 10% slower, it seems like, compared to Linux. It gets more noticeable with larger files because there's a whole lot more that it has to go through to get to your file. IIS, once again, doesn't have pages of configs, unlike Nginx and Apache. So it's like a trade-off of less customizability, but like it's easier to set up for people who don't want to go in depth. So I mean that's a good and bad. Uh, another downside, last downside I'll be going over is it doesn't have community support, which is a big problem with dealing with Microsoft. They have tons of applications that they always have to patch, and critical vulnerabilities can go unpatched for months at a time and then lead to critical, devastating infrastructure down the road. Like just recently, how the Exchange hack left tens of thousands of companies vulnerable. But when you have like a small, like open source, like Apache and Nginx, if they find something wrong, they're gonna patch it right away, which is like super cool to have that community support. All right. So serving FTP. So you saw here, I had this FTP site as well. So I'll just show you how to use it first. Go to CMD, whatever loads. FTP. So just go to the IP address. It'll ask you for a username, administrator, password one bang. All right, so now we can go type ls. Oh, look, my password.txt. This is where you store your file. Like this is stored in c/ftp directory, I believe. I just made my own directory quick. Yeah, FTP share. So anyone or any user on this server has read permission. I'll go over more about that in a little bit. So if you wanted to read it, you could, I believe, download. Nope. So there's help. There's you can like put, if you want to add a file, if you have write permissions, you can use put, and maybe to get. Oh wait, is it? No. So if you wanted to just like now if we this, oh yeah, it's get. So get my password.txt. Now it's been downloaded to wherever I am currently. So now if I quit, it's in my administrator, my home directory. So I should be able to do more my password. Yep, and I'll just type out the thing. So I managed to successfully download that file. So now I can go over how to set up FTP. So if we go sites, you can right click to add your site, add FTP site. So site name, new site. We can set up a physical path. So we can go to our C drive. Let's just set this to the same one for easy use. Next. All unassigned once again, so it listens on all the interfaces. If you wanted to, you could have it port forwarded. I mean, or just have a domain name set if you have like a DNS server set up in your network for your employees, or you just have your global thing respond to FTP and just forward them to the server locally. That would work. I mean, it's a lot easier to access with a host name, so that we don't like lose the IP if it changes at all. So enable virtual host names. Let's disable that. Listen on port 21. Actually, we already have one listening on port 21. So let's go with enabling port. No, we need, okay. Instead, we're just going to enable virtual host name, I guess. ftp.defsec.local. No SSL. Start automatically. Next. Let's just set up with anonymous read-write access, So we go to anonymous. Allow access to anonymous users. Read write. That's very secure. Just kidding. Don't actually do this. Most of the time you want basic and probably specific users. You don't want just anyone to be able to access to your FTP server. It's most of the time you do this for environments you have to like share large files with other employees. So yeah, we can finish. All right, now we can see that it's not. Wait, why isn't it start? All right, there we go. I should restart it real quick, I guess. So it's listening on port 21 ftp.defsec.local. So let's see if we can get this to work. So we can go to our hosts, set up 127.0.0.1 ftp.defsec.local, save that. ftp.defsec.local. All right, we don't have to enter. Oh, wait. Invalid number of parameters. Oh, yeah, sorry. Quits. We have to say anonymous. No password. All right, I guess anonymous authentication is not allowed. So if I guess instead we can just go to administrator. Password one bang. And it logged in just fine. I'm not quite sure why. I guess IIS isn't that stupid. Or maybe it just doesn't work when you have an FTP listing on all the IPs and just this one. That's my guess. So I'll just move on. More testing. So serving, so I was just how do you serve a FTP with IIS? Probably the easiest way in my opinion, as compared to like installing external software and not having a whole server manager that's dedicated to it. So securing an IIS box, this is a lot shorter. So since it's Windows and it's secure by default, I'd suggest like disable directory browsing, which you saw is like a checkbox by itself, very easy to enable and disable. Disable anonymous write access and possibly even disable like anonymous read access if it's not really required. In general, just don't run WordPress. WordPress kind of sucks. Unless you don't use any plugins at all, then maybe it's okay. Just stock HTML wouldn't be that bad. But like in WordPress, it has a lot of PHP vulnerabilities, so you have to like really know what you're running, and it'd be okay. It's suggested to be running like WordPress in the cloud, so that way it's not on your server. So if that instance gets hacked, it's not going to go back and ruin your day. And then last one, just make sure your user permissions are set to least privilege. So you should like audit your user permissions and make sure not every user is able to log in as administrator. So basically securing an IIS box. Any questions?
Why?
Why what? He's just salty that Windows is better. It's all right.
You're the one who talking about like 10% overhead? That's ridiculous. And your little virtual host didn't even work. What's up
Hey,
with that?
my Windows virtual or my web server one did.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense because that's listening on 80 as well. So
I think it has to do with the order, but couldn't tell you. All right, that's it. Thanks for coming.
thanks for presenting.